general meeting of the IT Leaders Forum. As you heard, this is being recorded because it's just going to make it a lot easier to write the minutes afterwards. So first thing on the agenda is the last year's AGM. I don't know whether anyone took the trouble to read last year's minutes, whether any matters arising as a result of that are there.
Massive numbers, David, but clearly everybody's forgotten.
Indeed. Okay, fine. So can we take those as being approved? Any objections to those being approved? No. Right. Okay. Let's move on then and start the meeting proper. That's me. You can't see me at the moment, but that's what I look like. We've done that bit. So this was the committee for 2022, and as you see, I was the chair. Phil Crew was the previous chair, and you'll see the list of committee members there now. Later on, I'll talk about the committee that's taking over from next year, or from the end of this meeting, in fact. We've actually done quite a lot, I think, and what we've done is continue to evolve. It's important that you see this as a kind of continuum. So we changed the name, first of all, in 2020 to the BCS IT Leaders Forum from what it was before. The first BCS IT Leaders Conference was held in 2021. And at the start of this year, we adopted a refocus, re-engage and influence strategy, with the emphasis on professionalism, member engagement, and industry leadership. We basically reimagined what member engagement means post-COVID, and we introduced working groups on topics that you had suggested last year at the symposium which followed last year's AGM. And you're telling us, with hindsight now, that engagement such as this makes membership more fulfilling, and we know that people generally like to get the leadership perspective on important issues. We're still learning what works best, and we'll consider a range of different formats, but in just a few months, we've launched 6 IT leaders working groups that have so far involved more than 80 members. And on the back of that, we've already published 2 opinion pieces. So it's a good start, I think. Those are the working groups past and present. The first one, Pressing Reset in Our IT Management Methods, was featured at this year's conference. Software Risk and Resilience, the elephant in the room, is reaching its 2nd stage, and Jill is in the meeting today, who's leading that. And then the others started in the summer, and we'll come on to that in a moment. So if we take the year as a whole, in January, we had the Members Symposium after the AGM, and that was the source of, I think, all of the 2022 working group topics. We also completed our pilot working group, which considered the future of IT management methods. In February, we held our 2nd IT Leaders Conference, the future of IT leadership, and we also launched the Software Risk and Resilience Working Group, now entering phase 2. In April, the Future of Work event featured Microsoft, speaker from Microsoft, and Nigel Bingham. In July, we had the Mass Migration event, Cloud Effect. In August, we launched 4 more working groups, Nurturing Leaderpreneurs, IT Leadership Modules for Education, the Future CEO, and Early Career Leadership Appreciation and Mentoring. The November Software Risk and Resilience Roundtable, in November, we held a Software Risk and Resilience Roundtable discussion joint with the National Preparedness Commission. And also in November, we held the Digital Divide event joint with the Entrepreneurs Group. And then next month, Software Risk and Resilience event will be telling us what they've done so far, but also what's next in terms of where we think we're going to take this. So those that's the whole year in summary. Quite a busy one, but also in the background we've been doing a few other things as well. So we created rules of engagement for working groups, because we've got a number of them running now. We carried out internal and external communications improvements, because there's a lot being communicated to you and internally, and we wanted to try to make that easier for you to for us to manage, and for you to understand what was going on, what we were saying. We agreed a process for white paper submission and publication. We reviewed our membership criteria in the light of the changes to those for fellowship, and we changed our arrangements for regional events. We also cleared our historic non-BCS member list. There was these have become something of an anomaly since the BCS had changed the way that they managed membership. And we changed our constitution so that we're more aligned with member group rules. And this gives us some new freedoms, including ours to co-opt committee members and set up subcommittees. So during the year, although we were doing really quite a lot more, as well as events, we were running these working groups and so on, we became short of committee members, frankly, because we'd lost one or two from illness and one or two because of pressure of work and so on. And so it was a small number of people trying to do rather more. Under the member group rules, we're allowed to co-opt an unlimited number of committee members should we need to, and so simply adopting those rules seemed to be a bit of a no-brainer. It gave us a distinct advantage and provided us with a more flexible and sustainable future. So all of that's been done in addition, in the background, in addition to what you see as members when we stage an event or run a working group. In terms of objectives for the coming year, 2023, the three words I'm looking for here are inform, involve, and influence. And we inform through events and conferences. This is what we've always done, well, not the conferences, but certainly the events. And this and networking is often why people join, and we mustn't disappoint. We aim, though, to reach more people and have more face-to-face as well as hybrid events. We've attempted a number of face-to-face events this year, but had to cancel certainly 2 of them because of the rail problems. We'll try again in the coming year, but we do want to reach out to more people on an informed basis. Whilst this year was focused on member engagement, in 2023, our aim is to turn that engagement into involvement, not just in events and working groups, but in helping us to develop the BCS IT Leaders Forum itself. And this is why the changes to our constitution were necessary. And finally, if we want our efforts to be useful, where appropriate, we must influence others in the BCS and others externally. Internally, an example of this is where the conference is now part of the BCS program and events, helping the BCS to engage with IT leaders across all industries to position the BCS as a partner for businesses, not just IT professionals, and to increase awareness of the BCS offering across all sectors. We wholeheartedly support this, and our involvement will continue. An example of external influence is where we're currently working with the National Preparedness Commission and the Digital Policy Alliance, and we'll be looking to increase our external influence and work with BCS, and we will work with BCS HQ to do so. In terms of membership, we've got 2,043 members. A year ago, we had 8% more than that. In terms of our LinkedIn membership, we've got 1,684. That's up 1%. The IT Leaders Forum membership is driven by Salesforce. So if overall membership goes down, then it's likely that our membership also goes down. If you imagine that a lot of fellows are kind of more senior people, more perhaps older people, if they retire then and decide no longer to be members of the British Computer Society, and they're members of the IT Leaders Forum, then they exit the count that we have, as well as the BCS membership count. It does fluctuate. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, but overall on the year, the past year, it's down 8%. But the LinkedIn one is +1. We never remove people from LinkedIn unless they remove themselves. In terms of how that membership is made up, 23% of fellows are members of the IT Leaders Forum, and 4% of MBCS members. And interestingly, overseas members represent 10% of our membership. All of that, we might assume that all of that means that we've spent rather a lot of money, but in fact we haven't. The budget for last year up to September was 3,355, and we actually spent £119. This year our budget was significantly reduced, and so far we've actually spent nothing. And these are the consequences of COVID, of course, and we continue to feel the effect of that, but also the recent strike action has further prevented us from arranging events in London, all of which underlines the importance of our member engagement strategy. When it came to the election this year, there were 3 committee members that had come to the end of their 3-year term, and we lost an additional committee member who had stood down, and then later another, in fact, during the election process. So a total of 5 places to be filled. The election was launched, and 9 candidates were bidding for the initial 4 committee places. 75 valid votes were recorded for the 9 applicants, and those people there were duly elected to bring the committee to its full complement of 15. So we have from this meeting 3 completely new members, 3 re-elected, and that's the committee from this point onwards. But I stress we can also co-opt people from now on, so we can increase that number as and when we choose to do so, as appropriate. So welcome to those new people. Those of you who didn't make it in the election, don't worry, because I'm sure we'll be knocking on your door very shortly and asking if you want to make a contribution. Some special thanks. Jonathan Leeson, first of all, because he's the guy that's been running the events during the year, but also Jonathan has agreed to become vice chair during 2023, which means that in 2024 he becomes chairman. Phil Crew, because he ran the election, which turned out to be quite a process this year. A lot of people were keen to join the committee. And Shakib, who was up for re-election but failed to get re-elected, and he also runs one of our working groups. And the list below, Shakib, Jonathan, Matt, John Hall, and Jill Ringland, are the people who are leading those working groups. So I thank them as well. But Shakib will continue to run. It's agreed to continue to run his working group, and I think we will probably need to co-opt him in order to retain his knowledge of this organisation. I'd also like to thank all of the staff at BCS HQ, because when we do more work, they have to do more work, and we know that we've pressed them fairly hard over the last 12 months, perhaps longer actually. So thank you to all of those people especially, but thank you to everybody on the committee, because it is a committee activity, and we're all involved and we're all volunteers. Are there any questions? I kind of went through that fairly briskly in order to get through to the end, but I'm very happy to take questions and from anyone who might have a question as well. Are any hands up?
Yeah, there's no hands up at the moment, David, and there's no questions in the chat either.
Okay, so everybody's suitably confused. So that's good. And move on and close the AGM, I think, because the next bit is far more interesting. It's what we're going to do during the coming 12 months. So if our objectives are to inform, involve and influence, that's about member events, member working groups and probably much more. And we're going to try to influence people within the BCS and outside. We need your help starting right now. You know, if we're going to, who do we need to influence, for example? What do we need to be addressing? And what would you like to hear about? So to take us through this next part of the event, Jonathan himself is going to chair it, and it's your opportunity to ask questions and make suggestions, and you can, any ideas, any topics for events, people that you like us to try to get to speak to you, working group topics, whatever you like, in whatever font you like. It's your turn to ask the questions. And over to you, Jonathan.
Okay, thanks, David. If you don't mind leaving your item shared and just go back to the working groups, and I think that will be useful for folks if they've got any questions on those. But yeah, so thanks, David. Thanks for introducing me, and yeah, I look forward to being your vice chair next year. I guess that year starts quite soon, so yeah, we'll see how we go there. But yeah, the opportunity here, obviously, as members of the forum, you know, as David said, we want really you to be involved in the sort of the makeup of the IT Leaders Forum. Obviously, we've made a good start with that, with these working groups. And I thought we'd just leave this on here. If anybody's got any particular questions around the working groups, then obviously either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. I think we're all grown up enough not to start shouting all at one time. So if anybody's got any questions on the working groups, would you mind, yeah, either unmuting yourself or raising your hands, or if you would like us just to give a bit of an explanation on them, then we can do that as well. So anybody got any questions on the working groups? No? Anybody?
Why the hell did I agree to lead one, Jonathan?
Good question, John. Yeah, maybe you want to talk a little bit about yours and yeah, explain what you've been up to, John.
Well, we had two meetings. This is the IT leadership modules for university courses. I work at the professor at the Open University. I have a great interest in IT leadership. Clearly, a member of the ITLF exec committee, which I enjoy immensely. I've been a member of that and previously a lead since about 2007, 2008, which is an awfully long time. I know I don't look that old, but really I am. Thank you, Dan, for your kind laughter. It's clearly that you don't believe me, so that's fine. Anyway, so I have a great interest in IT leadership modules. I don't think this came from an observation, which is I don't remember if it's mine or not, that people who come into IT leadership positions don't get any training, don't get any education. They learn on the job. They come in, they do a fantastic job in general, but not because of any education or any training that they've had in their careers. We may have MBAs. I have an MBA. We may have MBAs in technology management, but it's not often the case that those leadership aspects, the socialization of technology, the working with people, is often very well covered. So this group is about trying to encourage an improved standard of IT leadership training and education within universities. Generally, it would be preferable to have universities, colleges, schools, preschools, babies still taking their mother's milk should have IT leadership training, as far as I can see. But I'm most involved in university courses, so that's where I'm looking at. We've had 2 meetings. The next one will be in January or even February. It's in my diary. I won't miss it because it's in my diary. And if you want to be involved, if you want to get involved, I see some familiar faces here, so that's great. If you want to be involved, if you want to get involved, please just contact me and I'll stick you on the mailing list, and we'll talk about this stuff. The tasks are pretty. The actions that people take from meetings are generally to talk from their own experience, which is very easy to do for many people in ITLF, or so it seems, or to look at existing documents, Sophia framework and things, and take stuff from that which would usefully transfer into leadership. The ultimate goal is to get BCS to accredit IT leadership modules. Whether they will do that or not, I do not know. Their current level is around level 4. We're talking about level 6 and 7, so there's a long way to go before that happens. And why the hell did I take this on? I've got no idea, but David talks very sweetly. Don't listen to David. Tie yourself to the mast. He's just gonna get you onto the rocks, and you'll drown, really. Thanks, David.
Thanks for the insights, John. And that, like I said, if anybody is interested in helping develop some of the university courses and modules, then reach out to John. I think there's a good question actually that Carl has raised. I know Carl's on the train, so I'll sort of voice it for him. It's in the chat, and this is a question around our intent. So would I expect the BCS would provide the voice of technology in the UK media, government, and be an insight engine? And I think, Carl, that's absolutely what we're trying to do. That's the influence component of the 3 I's that sort of David's put together. And clearly at the moment it's around, what are the working groups we want to focus on? Then ultimately, how do we make a difference? And maybe as we go through each of the working groups, we can maybe touch a little bit on that. And obviously, John's just mentioned where he would actually like to see the modules be part of the university courses, or even in schools from an early age. So I'm going to hand it over to Jill now, because that's quite a good opportunity for her to talk about the software risk activity, which she's leading, and also that's the next event that we've got organised coming up on the 10th of December. So Jill, over to
you. Thank you. So it was in fact at this event last year that I first got in touch with the IT Leaders Forum and said, I thought there was an issue lurking that maybe wasn't yet on the agenda, and that is that the economy and society are incredibly dependent on software. Hardware is getting more reliable. You can do things about network throughput and reliability, but software is the elephant in the room. And nobody seemed to be talking about it, though everyone in the IT profession knows, because most of us have written software, that it's actually a bit flaky in that. So what we've done over the past year is we've written a policy think piece, which Root proved quite a few things. Thank you, David. We had a few wrestles in there with working out how working groups and the ITLF related to headquarters. We produced the report, which we then have exposed at a round table, which we ran with the National Preparedness Commission, which David mentioned, and thank you for helping facilitate that, David. I thought it was a rather good event. A lot of very good discussion, very good engagement. Currently writing up the report, looking at how to explain to the Digital Policy Alliance what the issues are. And this is really now a cry for help. We've done the scoping the issue. Well, that's an exaggeration. because if you try and scope the issue, you have to work out how much it costs for people to be disrupted because their software doesn't work, either temporarily or for several days. And that's impossible. It's how long is a piece of string. But what we have realized is that this is significant. And there are really well understood reasons in the technology and also the way organizations are working that can only increase. So it's got a big impact on productivity. So this is the key message. There's a big impact on productivity from software risk and lack of resilience to this. Now, out of the roundtable, we've come up with really 3 separate avenues we need to explore, and these could, and I haven't been able to discuss this with David yet, be separate working groups. See how we go. One is to head the awareness activity. So this relates completely with the influence remit of ITLF. And this is awareness working with policymakers and people in government to really change the agenda, to get software risk and resilience on the agenda. So, for instance, if you go and look at something like the National Risk Register, no mention of software. You go and look at the infrastructure baseline plan, no mention of software or even IT, actually. And so we think there's a really important activity. It's probably a project that needs 2 or 3 people working on it over, say, 6 months with maybe a report in the summer. So that's one activity. That's leading the awareness activity, both working out what to do and starting to do it and see what works and what doesn't. Then there's an activity around resilience where the need is to get IT people able to talk to the risk people better, such that software and IT gets integrated in with the risk register and organizations start thinking about this as part of their overall portfolio. Because the big change in the last 5 years is that organizations that traditionally have really had very little to do IT are now totally dependent on it. And the board hasn't yet understood this change. And so there is an activity around resilience, starting to work with risk managers. And then there's another activity that John and I and Ed have been kicking around, which is how would you work with, I hate to say it, IT leaders? How can we help IT leaders and boards start to ask the right questions about software risk and resilience? And that's sort of almost coming back to our core. So those are the, how does it change IT management? David's question is, how on earth do you train an IT manager who grew up in a different environment to be an effective IT leader in this new environment? And what sort of language does the IT leader develop in order to communicate with the board? So 3 rather different activities. And if anybody felt like having another conversation with David or me or with John Hall about any of those, I'd be absolutely delighted. And then just finally, as Jonathan has very nicely put up on the chat, a more formal approach around phase 2 will be coming up on the 6th of December. And then I see that one of our very strong working group members, Stephen Castell, is wanting to talk about the software risk and resilience working group. So maybe, should I hand over direct to Stephen? Would that be okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Stephen, if you want to give some insights there.
Oh, I can unmute myself. Okay. Hello. Yes, Jill, totally love what you said about our working group. all very important three poster dimensions to what we're doing. The one thing you haven't mentioned, and why I picked this up when you first came up with it a year ago, and I think I was the one that responded and said, hey, that sounds interesting. It gels very much with a lot of the work I've been doing as an expert witness the last 3 decades, and trying to get awareness of the consequences of software failure. And this working group is unique, I think, in all the things I've been involved with over the past 30 years, in actually trying to look at the consequential impact of software failure. And why is that important? Because as we know, software is eating the world. And we've already had the PO Horizon affair, which has brought to the front pages of even tabloid newspapers the impact that reliance on a computer system, in this case, faulty reliance on a computer system, can cause to hundreds of people's lives over 20 years of civil prosecutions, all based on a faulty system. Now, that's a peculiar sort of consequence of software failure, but we can map out from that in all kinds of different industries and directions. We can probably confidently predict, although it's not something we want to predict, that there will be a very large scale economic impact of some software failure at some point in the future, possibly near future. And we've got various anecdotal case studies in our think piece about various other disasters that are being failed. I mean, the one that I know particularly that always comes to mind is the failure of a certain company called Foxmeyer in the United States, which was a multi-billion-pound company just in Texas, which was basically made bankrupt by the installation of a new logistics system. And that has happened to smaller and more limited effect in many other cases in which I've been involved with. Now, if you escalate that to the whole economy, to a whole nation, we are facing the possibility as everything becomes more and more dependent on interlinked, networked computer software and systems, that there will be a catastrophic cascade failure, which could affect millions of people's lives. And nothing is really being done by anybody that we could see actually to look at that and stare it in the face and say, what the heck do we do about it, to prepare for it, to put in protocols, whether at the individual, the corporate, the national organization, the governmental level, to address that almost inevitable large-scale failure, large-scale impact, large-scale consequences of a software and systems failure. So that's the emphasis I see for this working group. A lot of the other stuff, if you like, very, very important, but a lot of it has already been covered for over many years, well or not, we don't know, we can have a view on. But that's the difference with this working group that I see it anyway, and why I get quite excited about it. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, and of course, that's why we were so really pleased that the National Preparedness Commission have picked this up and said yes. And so, you know, they'll be looking at how to get that on the agenda of the relevant committees, cross-party political committees in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And so, provided we get our messages clear, we ought to be able to get them through. Which is good.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jill. Yeah, and I think that's a great example of a very active group. And like I said, you something that you wanted to do for a long time, Jill. I know you've got a lot of focus around it. And you know, if through the IT Leaders Forum 1 we can develop the group further, or there are other people that have got an interest, and it's that is can help on many sides. So before I go on to the next one, I just want to say, like, the concept here isn't that we've tried to find out all the working groups that we think are the right thing to do. So if you've got other ideas, or you think there's something that we should be influencing, either in IT or beyond into business or into government or into schools, then feel free to raise it to us as a member of the committee. What we are saying at the moment is that it should be a member of the committee that helps coordinate the working group. but then it doesn't mean that you can't raise them or indeed develop a team to run it, a bit like how Jill's doing here with the software risk and resilience one. So any questions at the moment on either of those groups or on other items that might have come into your head as a result of the initial discussion?
Hi guys, it's Gordon Thompson here. It's my first day in joining the forum, so apologies if I'm not really sort of familiar with all the work that's going on. I do resonate, hugely with what Jill and John have been talking about. I think, Jill, you mentioned before, that as IT leaders, we need to consider how we communicate with the board so they understand more about the risks of software resilience. I think that needs to go a little bit further. I think it needs to go to board education and have more digital literacy on the board, so it doesn't become, an IT communicating and trying to influence boards, for what to invest in and where to invest. I think we need to spend more time influencing sort of CEOs, CFOs in their total understanding of what IT is, and it's intrinsically to, to the success of their overall businesses. I think, perhaps one other avenue that would be, really worth exploring is in data security within that software risk and resilience. I think, if we look at the way that cybersecurity has changed, it's just not kids in their bedrooms trying to write code and, hack systems anymore. This is, it's terrorist organizations and organized crime and rogue nations that are, really trying to get under the skin of things and hack industries, either for disruption, for political ends, or financial gain for themselves. And I think that is probably a much more avenue that I think board members would probably start to try and understand and subscribe to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very good point. Board members are susceptible to GDPR and cyber risk. And in fact, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the States has started to insist that there be a cyber expert on every board. Our view is that cyber exploits vulnerabilities in software, and those vulnerabilities could well be hit by inadvertent users, and that in doing something about defense against cyber, not just reacting to cyber, but defense against cyber, you are actually going to be improving the basic software quality. So that, I think, is a very important point. And we're hoping to align with the people doing standards work on cyber to actually get them to go deeper into the software behind cyber attacks in order to get that established. On your question about the board needing to be IT literate, we discussed this quite a bit at the round table, and a view that seemed really quite a good way of thinking about this, because various people said, oh, the future CEO has to have been a CIO. Well, I'm not sure they're the right profile of personality, a lot of CIOs, but that's just how things are. But one view that emerged and seemed to get a lot of nods was that board members sometimes have finance qualifications, they sometimes have legal qualifications, but in either case, if they're finance guys, they think they can have a sensible conversation with the legal people. If they're legal people, they think they can have a sensible conversation with the finance people. Whichever background they have, they ought to be able to have a sensible conversation with the IT people. And so that's a sort of measure of what we ought to be thinking about by IT literate, in the same sense that, they've been through an MBA, so they've got a bit of basic finance. They should have been through an MBA and got a bit of basic IT. Problem, of course, with IT is that, you can have the principles, but so much of the infrastructure around it and the technology changes within 5 years that a lot of vocabulary is just out of date. So it's trying to find the concepts that would be helpful to those board managers in asking the questions of the IT directors and giving them the confidence so their eyes don't glaze over when they get a high-tech answer. It's a very real problem.
Yeah. No, I think also to that, Gordon, I think your comment about, what is it that impacts sort of, senior management, this is exactly what the role of the IT Leaders Forum is. as you're probably aware, there are lots of specialist groups within the BCS, and there are obviously one on IT security. But the thing here is focusing on what is it that from a leadership perspective we'd want to see influence within business. So I think that's a good conversation to have, and maybe the subject of another working group potentially, if we feel there's there's enough importance there. Yeah. So I think Jill's touched on it in software risk, and I also touch on it as well in the future CEO working group as well, but maybe we need to put more emphasis on it. So thank you for that. There was a question again, another new.
Do you mind if I just follow up on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely, John.
Very interesting point. I agree entirely with what you and Jill have said. I was at a meeting recently, it was one of Jill's meetings, where we talked about the risk register for an organization, and they didn't have anything to do with software on the risk register. Neither did they have anything to do with the plumbing in the organization. So it is sort of the thing that IT software has faded into the background. We need to bring it back into the foreground. Part of that is education of the board, but also as part of that of us learning to speak upwards to the board rather than for them to speak downwards to us. And that means talking in terms of the things that the board really care about. They don't care about software. And although if we were talking about risk management, which I think Jill is, if we're talking about resilience, Carl, yeah, exactly. It is everything that we would do, pretty much everything, 99.99% of the things we would do would involve software, because that's how organizations run these days. We do need to develop that vocabulary, we do need to develop that nomenclature, and we do need to develop those conversations so that the board listen to us, rather than them being able to ignore it like they ignore the plumbing in their organization.
Yeah. No,
thanks, Jonathan.
No, thanks, John. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, obviously, Dan's put a message in the chat, but recent new member to the AGM, first time he's joined, may have been a member for a long time, I don't know, Dan, but welcome to this first AGM and symposium. And absolutely, you asked the question, we're talking about IT, but does that also include digital and include data? And I'd say absolutely. It's about all aspects. I know, obviously, the definitions of digital and IT, people are intertwining sometimes these days. But yeah, it's we want to include all aspects, and if it's around, it could be from one end to digital marketing all the way to digital as a core activity as well. So yeah. Absolutely, we will include those. So if you've got anything that you'd want to raise on that, then feel free to do so. All right. Okay.
Can I make just a couple of comments?
Yeah, sure.
So firstly, very nice to actually see people, because this is the first time I'm coming to this, so it is nice to be able to actually see faces. I think just on the board side, I work for a university, so I'm a member of the executive that runs a university, and therefore we have a council that is our equivalent of a board. I've done a huge amount of work with them to help to guide them as to what digital, data, IT and everything can do. So as part of that, yep, GDPR, and I've got folks who work for me on that, and I've got cyber folks, and I give Audit and Risk Committee regular updates on this. But a lot more is the conversation about why the board should, or the council in my case, should actually care about all these things. So it's much more, we're a part of the business, and therefore it's about making sure that that part of the business is invested in, is capable of delivery. And so I think there's a balance about speaking honestly with the board, and it is as a set of equals, and not scaring them. Because certainly in my previous role, I saw a lot of cyber folks rock up, scare the living down out to the board, get short-term investment, and then it go horribly, horribly wrong. I think it is more of that moderated discussion which brings a balance of benefit and resilience and risk and the rest of it. And I'll shut up in one more, but just one comment. You said cyber exploits vulnerabilities in software. I don't think that's the major thing for cyber. It exploits vulnerabilities in people. You can go back to Kevin Mitnick and the books on social hacking. It's about people. And so I did a presentation to council where I deliberately talked all about the ways that people can cause chaos. and what we do to mitigate it through identity management, through software, through design, through all those things which we all know on this call. But the weakness is people. And interestingly, the outages which I've had have all been down to bad actors approaching and getting access through people. It's been the people that have been the problem. My tech systems, I can secure them, but I used to work for Janet, the higher education network. And so we used to say that we can make a secure network, we just chop all the people off it. And it is that kind of balance of the hardware, the software, and the wetware that causes the interesting challenges we all face on a daily basis. Right, having said hello, I shall now shut up again.
All right, thank you very much, Dan. No, it's good to hear from you. I'm going to hand it over now to Matt, who's going to talk about the Early Career Leadership Working Group.
Good afternoon, everybody. So the Early Careers Leadership Working Group, its primary focus is to see how members of the IT Leaders Forum can best operate as an advocate and mentor for. We're targeting two groups of people to start with. So people who are in the early years of their career who are aiming to be IT leaders, or possibly people who have just become IT leaders and need some guidance and mentoring. So the working group consists of a variety of people with backgrounds, say in consulting, like myself, but also the commercial sector, public sector. So people who actually have held senior IT roles right across the sort of areas we operate in. And what we want to do is have these people either through one-to-one mentoring or providing their experience, try to help this next generation, or actually provide group events to do this, as an overall group. We might also want to include a network of people who possibly don't work in IT, because IT only exists really to support the business or the overall organisation that people work for. And these people also have a requirement for IT leaders. So also using these people to help say, what do they look for in terms of IT leaders? And as well using perhaps even wider organisations. So perhaps, dare I say it, people working with IT recruitment who are tasked with recruiting IT leaders. I'm trying to bring this overall collection of people who form the basis of people who can mentor, give their experience, say how they got to where they are, and broaden people's horizons as well. Because what we found in some of our discussions is obviously an IT career has got wider and wider as time has gone on. It's very difficult for people starting out to actually understand the depth and breadth of what IT covers these days, and what you need to be a manager. It does link up to some of the other working groups, because as people have discussed, a lot of the things that people need to do as a IT leader isn't necessarily about IT. So lots of discussion about obviously things like employment law, even down to sort of managing property, so looking after people from a sort of soft career focus, not just IT. So there's those groups of people that we want to interact with, and we want to open it as well to not just members of BCS as well. We want to team with organisations. So there's been conversations about some of those organisations we could work with. So that's on one side. Then the second part of the task is to identify the target here. So the people that we want to work with, to mentor, to offer experience, and through that really demonstrate how the BCS can help them in the career. So we've had 3 meetings so far. It's early days. We have 2 actions, which is one, confirm 2 main actions. One is confirm that set of people who are and organisations who are best set out to provide that mentoring and that career advice. And the second one is actually identifying people that best need it. And so working with the members of BCS or the working groups or the bodies of the BCS and wider to find an audience to which we can help provide our guidance to what most people's passion really is the next generation of IT leaders to replace us. So that's what the working group is about. And we're always welcome to new people joining us, actually, because this is actually a wide subject. So there's a lot of work we can do. And I think we can really connect with the next set of people who'll be joining meetings like this in the next few years.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any questions for Matt at this time? No? All right, some great insights there, Matt. So I'm going to hand over to Shakib now, who's been leading the Nurturing Leaderpreneurship. Shakib.
Hi, everybody. Hope you're well. So a couple of the things that were mentioned before around the board and resilience. I saw a comment on resilience. So what we're talking about is really about business resilience. So with business resilience, you get technology and all the other stuff into one place. Businesses don't talk about business resilience. That includes IT. So it's one of those themes that maybe we should be bringing up at the board. Nurturing leaderpreneurs is really a discussion we've been having in the background around IT leaders being more entrepreneurial, therefore nurturing IT leaders to be entrepreneurs. And it allows them to have that voice. The idea is that allows them to have the voice on a board. So how do you do a pitch deck, or how do you do the ROI? How do you influence the board? So that was one of the things that we discussed. And the other angle is really looking at those entrepreneurs out there that are running tech companies without any tech skills. So it's entrepreneurs into IT leaders, because are they driven by quality or assurance or growth? So you'll see a lot of tech companies out there, but driven by marketing and sales, but not technology excellence. So we've got this kind of funny area around how do we drive IT leaders up the food chain onto the board and be clearly heard. I liked Jill's comment actually earlier on. For me, I've always said this around the entrepreneurs or the technical people that I work with. They should go and do an MBA. If IT leaders did the MBA, they would have the skill set or develop the skill set to actually become the CEO. My background is tech for 40 years, but the last 7 years I've been leading the BCS Entrepreneur Group and a lot of mentoring around technology and growth. So I think there's a lot of skills that we should be passing on to the next set of leaders. And that's really how to drive align technology to the business drive. The IT leaders need to really understand what is driving that business. What is the 5-year plan, 3-year plan, 1-year plan, and the next 90 days. What happens is we're always being told in IT, oh, you've got to deliver this. And here's the budget or the rough budget, and this is the timeline. And there's always too little, too late. But if we influence and be part of the thought process of taking the business forward as a growth piece, then how do we make sure that we align the technology to the business? But we do it through, rather than going and buying more products or connecting more products, is actually what is the right solution for the business? Because I've seen many businesses, and one of them is a high street retail with 500 businesses connected and interworking, but nobody knows which solution that they're running doesn't need to be there because they've been running it for 30 years. Yeah, so having a clear understanding of what future technologies are going to be. We're moving into the cloud. We've got NFTs, blockchain, metaverse, and all these other things that people are now looking at. How will that influence or change or impact IT and business? Any questions?
No, I think we're all good at that. Yeah, so I guess I'll move on to the next one, which is the future CEO, which is the item I've been leading. And it sort of intertwines with a lot of what's been said so far. So I think hopefully what you're starting to see here is that, there is commonality among these working groups, but that doesn't mean to say that we've got duplication, because I think we're all coming at it from slightly different sides and angles. And then also the people we're trying to influence can vary as well. So in terms of the future CEO working group, what we're trying to do here really is look at what are the skills that a CEO would need in the future, as it says. So, obviously we're looking at it from an IT perspective, but it's not just about IT. So how can a CIO or a senior IT leader potentially become a CEO or a member of a board? So I know probably lots of you have either got non-exec director roles or indeed directors of a board or on a council, or even in fact a CEO or a COO or a CIO. And it's all about what are the skills that are needed in order to be successful, especially as we've all been talking about recently, how business is changing where IT is becoming core or a requirement in order to operate. So if you don't have an IT system that is secure, reliable, up and running all the time, you won't have a business at the end of the day. And I think that's the direction a lot of organizations are getting to. Either they don't have the staff to operate in a mode where they could do things manually, or there isn't even the capability from a non-digital perspective or a non-IT perspective to run the business. So you've got to understand, one, how to run your business using IT on a day-to-day basis, but equally, how do you run it when there are either a disaster or an impact or a lack of availability of a certain solution. So that's a lot of what we've been talking about. And I think so far, if you look at the members of the group, it's great to see there's quite a lot of diversity there. So some people who are both a CIO, CEO, because it is a digital company that they run, and therefore by nature of it, they're both responsible for the IT, but also the business itself, because the business is around computing or is very IT related. You've got people that have come from a corporate background that perhaps want to go up the chain and are struggling, because it is seen in order to be a CEO, you've got to come from, say, operations, or you've got to have a finance background, and are finding it difficult or struggling to get recognised for that importance. And then some people are trying to become sort of directors of the board or members of councils, and are not being treated seriously for the skills that they have. So we're seeing a lot of conversation around that. So I think the next stage for us is where do we influence others within other organisations. I think very early on we sort of started to say, how do we explain this, as some of you have touched on, to sort of senior management, that actually you need to be able to operate and understand IT in order to be successful, or in order to transform your business in the future. So how do we get that conversation going, and who do we need to speak to in other organisations to make that happen? Because, to be fair, we're sort of talking to ourselves and we're all nodding and agreeing because we're all IT people, but IT is important. But if you went to, say, the Institute of Directors, for example, that I do some work with, and I go and talk to some guys that are in fruit packaging in Kent, where I'm based, they'll say, well, I'll just go and get an expert as and when I need them. I don't need my CEO to be an expert in IT. They'll just go and get the right person as and when they think they need it. But that doesn't drive the business forward, because they're just thinking about the ad hoc requirements and needs. So I think we've had some good conversation around that as well. But I think, if you cut a long story short, if you're interested in getting involved, perhaps you can have some influence in other groups as well. So we are working with the CIO Net, which is another organisation, to potentially put on some events next year. But if you're a member of perhaps another organisation or group that you think actually this would be great to have a conversation with, to get this on the discussion, then welcome your input as well. So that's where we are at this time. So yeah, any other comments, or you want to share anything, then feel free to do so. All right. Well, I think that's all the groups. I think the pressing the reset activity, I think that was a previous one. I'm not aware that we've got that one active at the moment. So again, we can have another look at that. But are there any other sort of questions or things you want to raise, or any thoughts or stimulus that has come across as a result of the discussion we're having today? No. All right. Well, if there's anything.
Hang on. I couldn't raise my hand quickly enough, John.
All right. Sorry.
I'm supposed to know where all the buttons are on whatever,
Right. Oh yeah, John.
whatever thing this is, and Teams and Zoom and Skype and everything. And you what?
Go, John.
I forgot what I was going to say now. Now, I think, sorry, what I was going to say was, this is the best attended AGM I've been to for ITLF, and I think that's testimony to David's leadership and your facilitation of this meeting. So thank you for that. I also hope that the people that are involved this evening are the most active volunteers that ITLF have, and do really get involved in the stuff that we've been talking about. we do need your insights. We do need your expertise. We do need everything that you can add to this. And given that you're here, why not stick your hands up and say, I'm going to volunteer for something. So thank you to David. Thank you to Jonathan. And thank you to all those. Stephen's got his hand up. What you want to volunteer for, Stephen?
Can I ask a question?
Scrapping what you said, John. Here.
No, that was a volunteer. Andy, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask quite a practical question. I'm an interim CIO, etc. And I happen to be between contracts, and that's kind of why I'm here, because I've got a little bit of time. I'm very willing to help, Agile. I'm probably interested in all the topics. As an ex-developer, Jill's group sounds quite interesting, etc., etc. But then I'm an IT leader too, so the others sound pretty interesting too. I suppose some idea of time commitment would be useful to make sure I don't overpitch myself.
It won't extend past your natural life, Andy.
I bet it does.
But it may take all those hours before then.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Andy. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are asking that. And you know, I think we've got the flexibility in most of the groups for you to add as much input as you want. You know, at the end of the day, these are you're all here voluntarily, and it's the insights that are important. And if you can give 1 hour per month, and that's all you've got, then that 1 hour is just as important. Then please share. If I talk about my group, for example, I try and meet every 2 weeks, and we spend about an hour talking about and discussing some of the activities. But I also have a SharePoint site where we try and collaborate as well, and I'm quite happy for people to submit content on there. So even if you can't attend the sessions, but you want to input, then feel free to submit data. I'm sure we're setting up collaborative spaces for all the other groups as well, so that people can jump in and out as needed. Maybe somebody else, one of the other working groups, you want to respond to that as well.
Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, I see Carl asked the same question as well. So I think, Carl, you asked the question about how can we let other groups know what's happening, and I think that's a very good observation. Is obviously we've got within the BCS that we're sort of trying to make these things aware through the events that we organise. The IT Leaders Forum actually goes beyond the BCS, so there are members of the IT Leaders Forum that, as David mentioned, that are not members of the BCS. But again, are very IT focused. We have the LinkedIn group, which is a closed group, and again, we can use some of that as an opportunity. But I'd also actually encourage you. I'm sure you've all got LinkedIn profiles. I've certainly got my own sort of LinkedIn space, and we try and share some of this conversation to get things going and to get input from others. So feel free to do that. Use your professional knowledge and experience to share what we're doing and what we're discussing. And as a result of that, if that then means another group, let's say the Institute of Accountants says, look, I'm really interested in having a conversation about leaderpreneurship in one of our events, then we'll do that. I think that we want to continue to have this engagement with other parts of organizations and business. Otherwise, we're just going to be seen as the IT group doing things for themselves, which is clearly not what we want to do. So again, Carl, if you've got any particular knowledge there or experience where we could work with other groups, and feel free to share that.
Can I come in here, Jonathan? This is an interesting topic because we do tend to operate in silos. Interestingly, a lot of people within the BCS are members of more than one group. So members of the IT Leaders Forum, for example, many of us are members of other groups as well. But if we want to extend an invitation to one of our events to other members of other groups, that's quite a difficult process, and we have to go through the chair of the other groups, and they have to then communicate with their own members. And quite often we do that. In fact, we're doing that currently with Jill's next event on the 6th of December. But it is down to the chairs of those groups to actually say, yes, I'm prepared to do that. So it's a real issue, and we do try to overcome it. We do reach out as much as we can to members of other groups, and we try to encourage as many people as possible to come to our events if they think they're relevant to them. So we do try, but it is a difficult thing to do, and I don't want you to run away with the idea that we don't try to communicate. We don't communicate with other people. We do. We work very hard at it, and anyone that wants to come to one of our events certainly can do. There's nothing to stop them doing so. Question I have is, we've talked a little bit about the working groups that exist at the moment. Are there any other working groups that we should be thinking about setting up? Are there any speakers that you think we should be inviting to speak to our group that would have something interesting to say? These are the things that we would like to hear from you now. If we've got a little bit of time, anyone that's got suggestions would be very happy to listen to you.
Right, it's Shakib. So just, I mentioned this before, is actually setting up a small social media team, comms team within the group, because they can liaise with each of the working groups and create comments, posts, and everything else to increase the activity. The best way to get to the membership of the BCS is actually through their LinkedIn groups, because then you're not asking permission. But if you want to raise the profile of the IT Leaders Forum and the working groups, we should be using social media, because it's not just about the members of the BCS. There's more people that are in IT that are not members of the BCS. So we're going to start driving excellence in technology and leadership and IT leadership training, that we should do that to the general public.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Steve. I think Dan's obviously mentioned, just said here, do we have relationships with professional bodies? I think it's fair to say, as David's pointed out, people are members of other bodies themselves, and so you've got that informal route. The BCS themselves also does have some relationships with other groups and other parties. So we have an opportunity to utilise some of those if we want to run sort of cross-organisational events. But yeah, I think the more we can do ourselves on a social basis through various channels, I think will help gain that insight. Mike, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So I'm a member of the BCS Enterprise Architecture Specialist Group, and what we've found is that I appreciate there's a question about other professional bodies, but even just pairing up with other BCS specialist groups actually can be quite effective, because you kind of got common interests and so you create more critical mass. And I was kind of wondering what the BCS IT leaders' view of architecture is. I haven't really heard the word architecture yet, and I think it's it often is or should be at the forefront of business engagement and of leading in charge of new territories. And so I'm just wondering whether there's a question of BCI IT leaders and the Enterprise Architecture Group, which is actually considering changing its name to Architecture and Strategy Group to broaden not just enterprise architecture, but also reach some of the higher level solution architects that are out there. So given that, could there be a point of view expressed at a potential event or similar between this group and the current Enterprise Architecture Specialist Group?
I'd like to come in here, Mike, because I've got a particular interest. I was actually an architect, a data architect initially for a fairly large organisation. I was then headhunted by another. I became strategy manager and developed data architecture and systems architecture for a very major organisation. And I've used it strategically throughout my career. Well, since I think I did my early modelling with a company called CACI back in the a long time ago. And so it's always been very important to me to develop architecture in order to think about strategically about what the company is doing, because it's actually what you're doing is mapping data and solutions and so on and so forth, trying to make it easier to understand how you're going to put these things together and communicate with the board. And in fact, on 2 companies, we restructured the business around the data architecture. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, quite interesting. So it is important, and there is a leadership element to it. What I wouldn't like to do is drag leadership into down some sort of rabbit hole of architecture as such, but I would be very happy I think we probably can work on something which is about elevating architecture to become a strategic topic in the leadership sense, or business leadership sense, which is probably, I think, where you're headed. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I agree with you that it's like a Venn diagram. The two overlap, but one is not a superset of either of the other. But in that area of the overlap, I think there's a point of view to the debate, whatever you want to say, of what are the opportunities or such like of using architecture in a leadership context and vice versa. I think that there could be an interesting conversation and point of view around that.
Well, one is we could run an event based around, for IT leaders, based around the merits of architectures, or we could set up a working group which says, are we really exploiting architectures to the fullest extent in terms of managing a business or an organization?
Oh, maybe an earlier start to that is just start publicising some observations on LinkedIn groups and see if you get any feedback, Mike. You know, because if you get a lot of questions or people asking this, that, and the other, then you say, yeah, okay, there's clearly enough interest here to create a working group, so go for it.
Yeah. So yes, I think it's an interesting topic. So let's have a conversation about it.
Okay, I'll post the LinkedIn group of this IT leaders.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Stephen. Chris has had his hand up for quite some time.
Hi, thanks. Hand up. Sorry, that's my bad for using this.
Thanks, Jonathan. And good to meet everyone. For the first time, Chris Fowler. I just thought, further to the point about LinkedIn groups and involving the membership in the discussions and what's happening, is it feasible to put some sort of poll up there with suggestions or ask for comments from the LinkedIn forum to say that what are you interested in next year? What's on your mind, sort of thing?
Yeah.
We've got some good groups already. They sound really, really interesting, but I think maybe just in view of the meeting on the 6th, getting a bit more of a wider view.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. Yeah, I think surveys and questions are always good way of getting insights, aren't they? So, yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, Stephen.
Sorry, very quickly, and I put this forward with some hesitancy because I must make clear I just don't have the time to lead what I think would be probably a really important group, particularly under the mantra IT being good for society, which is the whole issue of honesty in software development. I sit on the committee of the law specialist group, and we're looking at future events centered around, there's a law commission consultation going on about digital assets. There's another one going on about decentralized autonomous organizations. There's something called what I call FTX Gate, which is one of the largest crashes in the whole cryptocurrency, which is still going on with wider and wider ripples. And I'm actually an expert in cases related to that. Lucy Hunt, who's doing a PhD at Lancaster in whistleblowing in software engineering. This is all part of the same mix of, there's the online safety bill going through Parliament right now with lots of amendments being done to it. The issue of actually software coders writing what might be called fraudulent software from the start, and what are their ethical and professional responsibilities not to do so, is going to become an enormous issue, I think. It's already become, it's quite clear without giving away too many secrets that many of the major cryptocurrency exchanges have deliberately been asking coders to write what one might call, and I don't necessarily allege that because I don't want to libel anybody, but fraudulent software to deliberately deceive. Now, that is something which in my too many years in this industry, I have not come across before. IT people are generally, they're techies and they're generally honest. It's bad enough trying to, I've said in a case many years ago, bad enough trying to design software without bugs in it. To be accused of I've deliberately put bugs in it is almost nonsensical. But there's a working group there for us, I think. I don't know what we call it, and I don't have any time to lead it, but I thought I'd just put the thought on the table in case somebody else might care to pick it up.
Yeah, no, it's integrity and ethics, isn't it? It's that side of things. Okay, no, it's a good one, Stephen. Andy, I see you got your hand up.
I was
Sorry,
deliberately trying not to use the word ethics because that's
Yeah,
too subjective a term.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
So I just want to endorse what Stephen just said first, but that's not what I came on for. But yeah, I do agree. There's a whole load of ethical honesty issues around there, isn't there? The thing that occurred to me as an interim CIO for the last 5 years is a lot of what I do is go into organisations, and I get asked to do several things. One of them is an IT strategy, or a digital strategy, or a data strategy, or an outsourcing strategy, or a cloud strategy. You know, a strategy of some kind. And I noticed there isn't a group called strategy. Now, maybe that's deliberate because it's buried elsewhere, but it would certainly be of interest to me to talk about strategy, whatever that means. And I recognise it doesn't necessarily mean what it first appears to mean, because these are just part of the organisational strategy, etc., etc., etc. You know, you can get into all that, but there isn't a strategy group that I can see from this list at the moment, and I wondered why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a leadership issue, isn't it? It's certainly a leadership issue.
So is your question within the scope of IT leaders or the BCS overall?
I think, well, I asked it in the context of this group, but I'm asking, clearly it has a much wider remit than just, I mean, that's the whole of BCS really, isn't it? What is IT and digital strategy, et cetera, et cetera.
So there is a proposal to rename the Enterprise Architecture Group into the Strategy and Architecture Group. That is a proposal which is good to be reviewed. So I'm sharing private information, but in this forum, I think that's appropriate. So that may help. I don't know.
It may do, but I wonder if it's just a third part of your Venn diagram. That's my worry. Maybe strategy, architecture, maybe, I don't know, and other things maybe all overlap but not the same thing. I don't know. Architecture for me is hugely important, and I sort of learned that sort of 10 years ago that architecture was all, in many cases. You know, you're looking at architecture, you design your systems around it, your people systems around it, but that isn't what I present to boards. I present how IT can enable the organizational strategy, which is partly architecture, but it's also 20 other things.
Yeah,
sure. No, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah. No, it's again, it's another opportunity, and it's again, I think, you know, I think there are things that we haven't touched upon yet. You know, we set these working groups up effectively this year, so may well be other things that we want to look at. Yeah. All right, I think Jill, you had your hand up briefly. Have you?
I was just going to say that there is a group called FTAG, which has a number of strategy people on it and badges itself as a thought leadership group. Might be worth investigating. Mm-hmm. It has some really good people on it, including an old friend of mine who was head of IT strategy at TfL. And so she went in, and on the first day they said, well, you've got 6 months to think of an IT strategy. And after a day, she came back and she said, well, there's only one strategy. You've got to get rid of all the individual bits of IT and go one TfL. Okay, if we go one TfL, I can then do the strategy. And they go, oh, we can't do that. Anyway, she has since moved on from TfL. But anyway, she's one of the people on FTAG, people who are having capable of having that sort of conversation.
Okay, thanks, Jill. That's good. And again, you know, as I previously said as a comment, you know, if you put something on the LinkedIn forum and then say, look, this is an area I've got some time and effort and I'm keen to talk about, see what sort of posts you get. And because I think, you know, that's besides just using the forum just to promote events that are coming up, we would actually like to start having these discussions and saying how we can influence each other. So that'd be very useful. All right, very good. All right, anything else? We've got 9 minutes left before I give you back the rest of your evening.
I'd just like to add, Jonathan, there was a question about how much time does this kind of thing take up? And I'd just like to stress that we are all volunteers, and no one expects everyone to devote every bit of their time to whatever they volunteer to do. You know, this is not sensible. But we do want to make use of people's knowledge. We do want to tackle topics which are important to us and try to provide opinions. I mean, people are interested in our opinions. We don't have to necessarily produce learned papers. We've all done that kind of thing, I guess, or many of us have. But this is much more about opinion. And what do we as a group think? Where are we headed? What are the issues of the day? What do we think ought to be done about it? Let's give some direction to some of the things that we know need to be addressed. It's that kind of thing. And so this isn't. We clearly need to give thought to these issues, but it's not immensely time-consuming necessarily. It's about establishing a consensus view amongst a number of us who have an interest in issues of the day, and that isn't time-consuming, but it helps if people can devote some of their time to some of those issues. And so I'll just leave it to that. Don't be frightened to be asked to help, because we're not looking for you to take on another job. We're looking for you to express a view and to share that with like-minded people. Thanks. That was what I wanted to say.
Thanks, David. Well, no, I just wanted to say thanks. Stephen, you want to say something? No.
Sorry, just picking up on strategy, just a humorous end piece, maybe not humorous. Big companies get enormously involved in thinking about strategy and what they should be thinking about strategy. And it just reminded me that when I did some consultancy work back in the early days of the BT privatization to the main board, I was tasked with developing a new strategy in broadcast communications for them. And the first thing I was told to do was go out and find out where was the unit that was actually doing the BT corporate strategy. And I kid you not, I found actually 6 completely separate units spread throughout BT, each of whom thought they were the one that was defining and doing and developing and submitting to the board ideas and plans for BT's, that's corporate, main board, corporate strategy. And I just pass that on as a slightly humorous end piece. Yeah. About the issue of strategy. It's enormously important, and the point is, you want one set of brains doing the strategy, not 6 different ones. Otherwise it isn't a strategy, it's just a mess.
It's always good to have a plan B though, Stephen.
Yeah.
And C and D and E.
All right, no, that's good. No, good way to end. Well, I just want to say thanks to everybody for their participation. And like, as David said earlier, we have recorded this purposely so that we can trawl through all of your comments and questions that you've raised, so that we can see where is it we want to put some focus on for next year. But equally, if you feel you've not had the opportunity to raise anything, or something happens to come into your mind tonight while you're watching the football, I'm not watching football, by the way. I'm not into that. But if anything does jump into your mind, then feel free to raise it to us. Either directly through us, through the committee, or through the IT Leaders Forum. And yeah, this is the whole purpose of this group is for ourselves to work together, and not for a bunch of committee members to push things onto you. So we really want involvement and active participation within the group. So thank you all for your time.
And thank you from me.
Okay, that's it. Well,
thank you.
Enjoy your evening, and yeah, look forward to speaking to some of you again in the future.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, I think John's still the only one left. John, I don't know if he's still there.
That's all right. No, I think we're happy with that. I think that went okay, didn't it?
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, some good conversation, and yeah, I think it's good for at least the forum to get some insights into the working groups. I think there's weren't aware of them, so that was useful.
That was a good idea, and I think it was so it fulfilled two purposes really. One is it gave people a bit more insight into what we were doing, but also got them talking, and it was good. I mean, you don't very often go to many AGMs where there's that much interaction, do you?
Yeah, no. Well, I think it was. In fact, it was open at the end, and like I said, it allowed people to see what's been going on. And I think you gave a good insight into what we've achieved this year. So it was I think also clearly a number of people have not realised that we've got the LinkedIn group as well, and to use that as a conversation.
Yeah, I think we can probably exploit that rather more.
Yeah. I guess one follow-up for me is really, how can we engage with other groups, isn't it? Not say just in the BCS, but externally, especially want to go down this influencing route. A lot of what we're talking about is really how can we get businesses to understand the importance of IT, certainly from a leadership.
Yes, I mean, I spent a good part of my career doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But so I've got a lot to say on that. But I think one of the things we could devote some time to as a group, and we can think about this on December when do we get together for what was going to be a Christmas thing? Is it 12th?
Well, I'm just looking now. No, that was a Monday.
It was a Monday, wasn't it?
Monday 12th, is it?
It was either the 12th or the
12th.
5th.
Oh yeah, 12th. Yeah, it's the 12th. Yeah, in the afternoon. Yeah.
It's the 12th. Yeah. What we could perhaps then is pull all this together in terms of the suggestions, but also there's a topic around what are the external bodies that we do want to influence.
Yes. Yeah, and how do we go and connect with them?
Yeah. Because just having a list of or identifying them would be really useful. Then we start to approach them, then we can start to establish where the common ground is and so on. And I think that would be really, really good. So have, on one hand, a bunch of topics that we might want to pick up and develop. And the other is a bunch of organizations that we want to influence.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good one. And I think the other one that sort of Keith mentioned that others did pick up on is this whole area of social promoting. So how do we promote doing?
Yes, because we relying on people in their headquarters is very difficult.
Yeah.
I've had so many examples in the last year of where that's just fallen down,
Yeah. It's
not working. And you rely on committees and chairmen of other groups, and there's just no communication at all. There are all these little links which don't seem to work very well.
Yeah, and also they do it within their sphere, don't they? Like Mandy, for example, is very, she's doing what the BCS have told to do, and right, and all the rest of it. Whereas I think we almost need somebody who's a social influencer on the group that actually it's their job to promote what we're doing in the IT Leaders Forum.
Yeah, it's all actually come together with Kerry, who kicked us off today, and she's so overworked, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's how do we as an IT Leaders Forum, who could we have, and we could reach out, and so it could be somebody who's got an interest in it, who just wants to promote, because I think it's quite a good cachet for somebody to say, look, I've been this, let's say the social engineer or the social promoter for a senior leadership forum. So it's getting somebody who's got the time and effort to do that, because I don't think necessarily a member of the IT Leaders Forum. It could be somebody who's just wants to get involved in promotion and awareness of organisation.
It could be. I personally think it should be somebody in headquarters.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, but I think the question is, have they got someone? That's the question.
Well, I think they should reorganise themselves, because I think the organisation is dire. I mean, it's death by pity.
Well, maybe that's the question. We reach out to the look, we need to do some more promotion, especially externally, and we want somebody to help the group be more engaged. Have you got anybody in the organisation that can help us do that? Yeah, I think that's right, and I think I mean, there's no better way of influencing the BCS than restructuring it. No, yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. And they're always thinking, well, again, they're supposed to do it for their members, so we can say, look, this is to help with our membership. So how we,
I mean, we don't tackle the whole thing, but we could just say it would be really helpful if.
Yeah, we need somebody who can be an influencer for the group.
Yeah,
and work on that side of things. Okay.
Good. Right. So if we can get this, I'll try and get this written up, and I think what I'll do, try and pull some ideas together from
the recording
various bits, so we can talk about it on the 12th.
All right. Okay.